When Gavin's wife came home smelling like someone else's cologne, he had no idea it would lead to the ultimate betrayal from his best friend. What happens next will change everything. The gentle glow of the computer screen illuminated Gavin Thompson's face as his fingers flew across the keyboard. Lines of code scrolled by, a digital symphony only he could hear. At 39, Gavin had perfected the art of losing himself in his work, finding satisfaction in the elegant solutions he crafted for his clients' software needs. A notification popped up in the corner of his screen, another wire transfer. Gavin's eyes flicked to the amount, $43,000. A small smile tugged at the corners of his mouth. Another job well done, another satisfied client. He quickly dismissed the notification and returned to his code. The money was nice, of course, but it wasn't why he did this. For Gavin, the thrill was in problem-solving, creating order from chaos. The sound of the front door slamming jolted him from his reverie. Gavin glanced at the clock. 7:30 p.m. Jenna, his wife of 10 years, was home. He saved his work and stepped out of his home office, padding down the hallway in his socked feet. "Hey, honey," he called out. "How was your day?" Jenna stood in the entryway, kicking off her heels with more force than necessary. Her sleek blazer and pencil skirt looked immaculate as always, but her face was etched with tension. "Fine," she snapped, not meeting his eyes. Gavin's brow furrowed. "Everything okay?" he asked, taking a step closer. Jenna brushed past him, heading for the kitchen. "Just tired. Long day at the office." Gavin followed, watching as she yanked open the refrigerator door and grabbed a bottle of white wine. "Want to talk about it?" he offered, leaning against the counter. "Not really," Jenna replied, pouring herself a generous glass. She took a long sip, then finally looked at him, her eyes narrowed. "You've been in that office all day again, haven't you?" Gavin shrugged. "Yeah, I had a big project to finish up, but it's done now." "The client's happy." Jenna rolled her eyes. "Great. Another day of you hunched over that computer while I'm out there in the real world." The word stung, but Gavin kept his voice even. "My work is real, Jenna. Just because I do it from home doesn't make it any less valuable." "Whatever," Jenna muttered, taking another large swallow of wine. "I'm going to change." As she brushed past him again, Gavin caught a whiff of unfamiliar cologne. He frowned, a knot forming in his stomach. It wasn't the first time he'd noticed that scent on her clothes. Over the next few weeks, the tension in the Thompson household continued to simmer. Gavin threw himself into his work, hoping that if he just gave Jenna some space, things would improve. But each day, the distance between them seemed to grow. One evening, as Gavin was finishing up some routine maintenance for a longtime client, his phone buzzed with a text from Dean, his best friend since college. "Hey man, drinks tonight?" "Been too long." Gavin smiled. Dean Miles had always been the life of the party. They had gone through thick and thin together, though their career paths had diverged. Dean had gone into the flashier world of real estate development, but their bond had remained strong. "Sounds great," Gavin typed back. "The usual place at 8. "You got it," came the quick reply. Gavin emerged from his office, finding Jenna curled up on the couch, scrolling through her phone. "Hey, I'm heading out to meet Dean for a drink. Want to come?" Jenna looked up, surprise flickering across her face. "Oh. No, I'm good. You two have fun." Gavin hesitated. "You sure? It might be nice to get out for a bit." "I said I'm fine," Jenna snapped, then softer, "Really, go ahead." With a sigh, Gavin grabbed his keys and headed out. The familiar warmth of O'Malley's pub enveloped him as he stepped inside, scanning the room for Dean. He spotted him at the bar, already nursing a whiskey. "Gavin, my man." Dean called out, clapping him on the back as Gavin slid onto the stool next to him. "How the hell are you?" "Can't complain," Gavin replied with a smile, signaling the bartender. "How's the real estate game treating you?" Dean's eyes lit up. "Oh, you wouldn't believe the deals I've got cooking. Just closed on a prime piece of downtown property. The returns are going to be insane." As Dean launched into a detailed explanation of his latest venture, Gavin found his mind wandering. He thought about the substantial sum sitting in his own bank account, the result of years of hard work and smart investing, but unlike Dean, Gavin had never felt the need to broadcast his success. He was content with his modest lifestyle, finding joy in the work itself rather than the trappings of wealth. "Earth to Gavin," Dean said, waving a hand in front of his face. "You still with me, buddy?" Gavin blinked, forcing a smile. "Yeah, sorry. Just a bit distracted." Dean's expression softened. "Everything okay? You seem off." Gavin sighed, taking a long pull from his beer. "It's Jenna," he admitted. "Things have been tense lately. I can't seem to do anything right in her eyes." Dean nodded sympathetically. "Yeah, she mentioned you guys were having some issues." Gavin's head snapped up. "She talked to you about our problems?" "Just in passing," Dean said quickly. "You know, when we bumped into each other at the gym or whatever." I didn't want to pry. The knot in Gavin's stomach tightened. He hadn't realized Jenna and Dean were spending time together outside of their usual group gatherings. "Right," he murmured. "Of course." As the night wore on, Gavin found himself drinking more than usual, trying to shake off the growing sense of unease. By the time he stumbled into an Uber, his head was swimming. The house was dark when he got home. Gavin made his way to the bedroom as quietly as he could, not wanting to wake Jenna. But as he pushed open the door, he found her sitting up in bed, the bedside lamp casting a soft glow over her face. "Have a good time?" she asked, her voice flat. Gavin nodded slowly, removing his shoes. "Yeah, it was nice to catch up with Dean. You should have come." Jenna's laugh was bitter. "Right, because I'm sure you two had so much to talk about that I'd be interested in." Gavin frowned, the alcohol making his thoughts fuzzy. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing," Jenna sighed, turning over. "Just go to sleep, Gavin." The next morning, Gavin woke with a pounding headache and a sense of dread he couldn't shake. He found Jenna in the kitchen, already dressed for work, sipping a cup of coffee. "Jenna," he began, his voice hoarse, "I think we need to talk." She set down her mug, her face a mask of indifference. "About what?" "About us," Gavin said, taking a deep breath. "About what's been going on lately. I feel like we're drifting apart, and I don't know why." Jenna's laugh was sharp, humorless. "You don't know why?" "Really, Gavin?" "No, I don't," he said, frustration creeping into his voice. "So why don't you tell me?" "Fine," Jenna snapped. "You want to know?" "I'm bored, Gavin. I'm suffocating in this mediocrity. Every day is the same thing, you locked away in your little office, content to live this small, unremarkable life while I'm out there seeing what we could have, what we could be if you just showed a little ambition." Gavin reeled back as if he'd been slapped. "Ambition? Jenna, I work hard every day. I've built a successful business." "A business that keeps you hunched over a computer all day," Jenna interrupted. "When was the last time we went out? The last time we took a vacation? Hell, when was the last time you even bought something nice for yourself? Or for me?" "I didn't realize material things were so important to you," Gavin said quietly. Jenna's eyes flashed. "It's not about things, Gavin. It's about living. It's about experiences. It's about not settling for less than we deserve." Gavin felt a flicker of anger. "And who decides what we deserve?" "You." "I decide what I deserve," Jenna shot back, her voice rising. "And it's more than this." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Gavin's mind raced, trying to process what was happening. "Jenna," he said carefully, his voice shaking slightly, are you having an affair?" The silence that followed was deafening. Jenna's face cycled through a range of emotions: shock, guilt, defiance. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "No. But I've thought about it." Gavin felt as if the floor had dropped out from under him. He gripped the edge of the counter to steady himself. "With who?" he managed to choke out. Jenna looked away. "It doesn't matter." But Gavin knew. The cologne, the gym meetings, the way Dean had avoided his eyes when talking about Jenna. It all clicked into place. "It's Dean, isn't it?" he said, his voice hollow. Jenna's silence was confirmation enough. Gavin straightened up, a calm settling over him that surprised even himself. "I think," he said slowly, "that you should leave." Jenna's head snapped up. "What?" "You're clearly unhappy here," Gavin continued, "with me, with our life. So go. Find what you're looking for." "Gavin." Jenna started, her voice softer now, "I didn't mean." "Yes, you did," Gavin cut her off. "You meant every word. And you know what? You're right. You do deserve to be happy. But so do I. And I can't be happy with someone who doesn't respect me or the life we've built together." Tears welled up in Jenna's eyes. Are you saying you want a divorce?" Gavin took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment. "I think that might be for the best. Don't you?" The following weeks passed in a blur of lawyers, paperwork, and painful conversations. Gavin moved through it all in a daze, throwing himself into his work as a distraction. He barely noticed when Jenna moved out, taking most of their shared possessions with her. It wasn't until he received the final divorce papers that the reality of the situation truly hit him. As he stared at the document that would officially end his marriage, Gavin felt a wave of emotions wash over him: anger, grief, betrayal. But underneath it all, there was a small spark of something else: relief. He signed the papers with a steady hand and sealed them in an envelope. Tomorrow, he would mail them off, closing this chapter of his life for good. But tonight, there was work to do. Gavin returned to his office, opened his laptop, and lost himself in the comforting glow of the screen. The world of code was predictable, logical, unlike people. It would never let him down. As the sun began to rise, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Gavin finally leaned back in his chair. He had just put the finishing touches on a complex algorithm that would revolutionize his client's data processing capabilities. A notification popped up: another substantial wire transfer. Gavin allowed himself a small smile. He may have lost his wife and his best friend, but he still had this: his skills, his success, his integrity. And for now, that would have to be enough. 6 months passed, and the ache in Gavin's chest had dulled to a manageable throb. He had thrown himself into his business, taking on new clients and expanding his services. His reputation in the industry had grown, and with it, his bank account. One crisp autumn morning, as he sat in his office, a text from his lawyer buzzed on his phone. "Jenna's marriage license filed. Thought you should know." Gavin's jaw clenched. He'd known this day was coming, but the reality of it still stung. Setting his phone down, he took a deep breath and focused on his screen. Work had always been his sanctuary, and today was no different. Hours passed in a blur of code and conference calls. As evening fell, Gavin stretched, his back popping in protest. He was about to call it a day when his phone rang. The name on the screen made him pause. "Mom." "Hello," he answered, bracing himself. "Gavin, honey," his mother's voice was gentle. "How are you doing?" "I'm fine, Mom. Just busy with work." "I heard about Jenna and Dean," she said hesitantly. "Are you okay?" "Mom, I've been divorced for months. Jenna's choices aren't my concern anymore, Gavin said, trying to keep his tone even. But she married your best friend, his mother replied softly. Surely that must. Ex-best friend, Gavin corrected sharply. And honestly, they deserve each other. His mother was silent for a moment. I'm worried about you, sweetheart. You're working too much. When was the last time you went out? Met someone new? Gavin pinched the bridge of his nose. Mom, I appreciate your concern, but I'm fine. I'm focusing on my career right now. It's all I have left. Oh, Gavin. His mother's voice cracked. That's not true. You have so much to offer. Promise me you'll at least try to get out there. Join a club or something. Sure, Mom, Gavin said, knowing it was easier to agree than argue. I'll think about it. Listen, I've got to go. Talk soon, okay? After hanging up, Gavin leaned back in his chair, his mother's words echoing in his mind. Maybe she was right. Maybe he did need to get out more. The next day, against his better judgment, Gavin found himself at a local tech meetup. He stood awkwardly by the refreshment table, nursing a lukewarm beer and wondering why he'd thought this was a good idea. First time, a voice beside him asked. Gavin turned to see a woman about his age, her dark hair pulled back in a messy bun. She had an easy smile and kind eyes. Is it that obvious? Gavin replied, managing a small smile of his own. The woman laughed. Only to a fellow first-timer. I'm Nina. Gavin, he replied, shaking her offered hand. So, what brings you here? Nina shrugged. Trying to expand my professional network, honestly. My mother thinks I need to get out more. Gavin laughed, feeling a bit of the tension ease. Mothers do know best, or so they tell us. What do you do? As they fell into easy conversation about work and technology, Gavin felt something he hadn't experienced in a long time, a genuine connection with another person. When the meetup ended, he found himself reluctant to leave. This was nice, he said, surprised to find he meant it. Would you maybe want to grab coffee sometime? To, continue our discussion on data encryption? Nina's smile widened. I'd like that. Here, give me your phone. As she entered her number, Gavin felt a flutter of something he'd almost forgotten, hope. Over the next few months, Gavin and Nina's coffee meetings became a regular occurrence. She was smart, funny, and most importantly, she seemed to genuinely appreciate Gavin for who he was. For the first time since his divorce, Gavin found himself looking forward to something other than work. One evening, as they walked through the park after dinner, Nina turned to him with a thoughtful expression. Gavin, can I ask you something? She said, her tone serious. Of course, Gavin replied, noting the shift in her voice. We've been seeing each other for a while now, and I really enjoy your company, but sometimes I feel like you're holding back. Is there something you're not telling me? Gavin sighed, running a hand through his hair. He knew this conversation was coming sooner or later. Nina, I should have been upfront with you from the start. I'm divorced. It's been about a year now. Nina nodded slowly. I had a feeling there was a story there. Do you want to talk about it? Gavin hesitated, but then the words came tumbling out. He told Nina everything, Jenna's dissatisfaction, her betrayal, and the swift remarriage to Dean. To his surprise, putting it into words didn't hurt as much as he had expected. When he finished, Nina was quiet for a moment. Then she reached out and took his hand. Thank you for telling me, Gavin. I can't imagine how difficult that must have been for you. Gavin squeezed her hand, grateful for her understanding. It was tough, but I'm moving on. Or at least I'm trying to. Nina smiled up at him. Well, for what it's worth, I think you're doing a pretty good job. As they continued their walk, hand in hand, Gavin felt a weight lift from his shoulders. Maybe, just maybe, there was life after Jenna after all. Weeks turned into months, and Gavin found himself settling into a new routine. His business continued to thrive, with new clients seeking out his expertise, and his relationship with Nina deepened. For the first time in a long while, Gavin felt genuinely happy. It was on a crisp spring morning, almost 2 years after his divorce, that Gavin's carefully rebuilt world collided with his past. He was grabbing coffee before a meeting when a familiar voice cut through the cafe's chatter. "Gavin? Is that you?" He turned slowly, coming face to face with Jenna. She looked different, her designer clothes were gone, replaced by a simple blouse and slacks. The confident spark in her eyes had dimmed. "Hello, Jenna," Gavin said, his voice carefully neutral. "How are you?" Jenna's smile was strained. I'm okay. How have you been?" Gavin shrugged. "Can't complain. Work's been good." An awkward silence fell between them. Jenna fidgeted with her purse strap. "Listen, Gavin, I don't. Whatever you're about to say, I don't need to hear it," Gavin cut her off, his tone firm but not unkind. "We've both moved on, right?" Jenna's face fell. "Right, of course. I wanted you to know that I'm sorry. For everything." Gavin studied her for a moment. Part of him wanted to lash out, to make her feel a fraction of the pain she had caused him. But he realized, with some surprise, that he no longer felt that burning anger. He was indifferent. "I appreciate that, Jenna," he said finally. "I hope you found what you were looking for." Something flashed in Jenna's eyes, regret, longing, but before she could respond, the barista called out Gavin's order. "I should go," Gavin said, grabbing his coffee. "Take care, Jenna." As he walked out of the cafe, Gavin felt Jenna's eyes on him, but he didn't look back. He had a meeting to get to, after all, and a life to live. Months passed, and Gavin's encounter with Jenna faded to a distant memory. His relationship with Nina continued to flourish, and his business reached new heights. One evening, as they prepared dinner together in Gavin's kitchen, Nina broached a subject they had been dancing around for a while. "So," she said, chopping vegetables with practiced ease, "I've been thinking." Gavin looked up from the stove where he was stirring a simmering sauce. "Oh. Should I be worried?" Nina laughed, tossing a piece of carrot at him. "No, you goof. I was just thinking, my lease is up next month, and I spend most of my time here anyway, so I was wondering if maybe, if you want to make this official." "Me moving in, I mean." Gavin set down his spoon, turning to face her fully. "Are you sure? I mean, I'd love that, but I don't want you to feel pressured." Nina set down her knife and walked over to him, wrapping her arms around his waist. "Gavin, I've never been more sure of anything. I love you, you know that, right?" Gavin felt a warmth spread through his chest. "I love you too," he said softly, leaning down to kiss her. As they broke apart, Nina grinned up at him. "So, is that a yes?" Gavin laughed. "Yes. Absolutely yes." The next few weeks were a whirlwind of boxes, furniture rearrangement, and countless trips to the hardware store. As Gavin helped Nina unpack the last of her books, he felt a sense of rightness settle over him. This was how it should be. One evening, after Nina had officially moved in, Gavin received an unexpected email. The subject line made his breath catch. "Dean Miles, urgent business opportunity." Gavin's finger hovered over the delete button, but curiosity got the better of him. He opened the message. "Gavin. I know I'm probably the last person you want to hear from, but I'm in a tight spot, and I could really use your expertise. I've got a development project that's on the verge of collapse, and I think your software skills might be the key to saving it. I'm willing to pay top dollar for your help. I understand if you want nothing to do with me, but please, at least consider it. This could be a mutually beneficial opportunity. Dean." Gavin leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. Part of him wanted to delete the email and pretend he'd never seen it. But another part, the businessman in him, saw the potential in this situation. "Everything okay?" Nina asked, poking her head into his office. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Gavin sighed, gesturing for her to come in. "Remember how I told you about my ex-wife and my former best friend?" Nina nodded, her brow furrowing in concern. "Did something happen?" "Not exactly," Gavin said, turning his screen so she could read the email. "Dean just reached out to me. He wants my help with a project." Nina read quickly, her eyes widening. "Wow, that's unexpected. What are you going to do?" Gavin ran a hand through his hair. "I don't know. Part of me wants to tell him to go to hell, but the other part sees a business opportunity." Nina placed a hand on his shoulder. "You know I'll support whatever decision you make, but can I offer my opinion?" Gavin nodded, grateful for her level-headedness. "I think you should do it," Nina said. At Gavin's surprised look, she continued. "Not for him, but for you. Show them both that you've moved on, that you're successful and confident enough to work with them professionally. Plus, it could be good for your business." Gavin considered her words. She had a point. And if he was honest with himself, the challenge of the project intrigued him. "You're right," he said finally. "I'll do it. But on my terms." He turned back to his computer and began composing a reply. "Dean. I'm willing to discuss this project further, however, let me be clear, this is a strictly professional arrangement. I'll require a detailed project outline and a substantial deposit before I commit to anything. If these terms are acceptable, we can set up a meeting to discuss specifics. Gavin Thompson, CEO Thompson Software Solutions." As he hit send, Gavin felt a mix of apprehension and excitement. Whatever happened next, he knew he was facing it from a position of strength. He had a thriving business, a loving partner, and a renewed sense of self-worth. Jenna and Dean might have shaken his world, but they hadn't broken him. If anything, they had made him stronger. Nina squeezed his shoulder. "You okay?" Gavin reached up, covering her hand with his own. "Yeah," he said, surprised to find he meant it. "I really am." As they left his office, heading to the kitchen to start dinner, Gavin felt a sense of anticipation. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he was ready to face them. A week later, Gavin sat across from Dean in a sleek downtown coffee shop, his laptop open on the table between them. The past week had been a whirlwind of emails and phone calls, culminating in this face-to-face meeting. Dean looked different, the cocky smile was gone, replaced by dark circles under his eyes and a constant nervous energy. "Thanks for meeting me, Gavin," Dean said, his voice lacking its usual bravado. "I really appreciate you considering this." Gavin nodded curtly. "Let's get down to business. Walk me through the project and where you're stuck." For the next hour, Dean laid out his real estate development plan, an ambitious mixed-use property that promised to revitalize a struggling neighborhood. But as he delved into the details, it became clear that the project was teetering on the edge of collapse. "So, you see," Dean concluded, running a hand through his disheveled hair, "if we can't streamline the construction process and cut costs, we're looking at a total loss. That's where you come in." Gavin leaned back, considering. The project was a mess, no doubt about it. But he could see the potential. With the right software solution, they could optimize everything from supply chain management to workforce scheduling. "It's doable," Gavin said finally. "But it won't be easy or cheap. My fee will be substantial, and I'll need complete autonomy to implement my solutions." Dean's relief was palpable. "Of course, whatever you need. Just name your price." Gavin named a figure that made Dean's eyes widen. After a moment's hesitation, he nodded. "Done. When can you start?" "I'll draw up the contracts this week. We can begin next Monday," Gavin replied, closing his laptop. As he stood to leave, he paused. Dean, I want to be clear about something. This is a business arrangement, nothing more. We're not friends, and we never will be again. Understood? Dean's face fell, but he nodded. I understand. And Gavin, for what it's worth, I'm sorry for everything. Gavin looked at him for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Save your apologies, Dean. Just don't mess this up. With that, he turned and walked out of the coffee shop, leaving Dean staring after him. Over the next few months, Gavin threw himself into the project. He developed a custom software suite that revolutionized every aspect of the development process. Supply chain efficiency soared, and what had seemed like an impending disaster slowly transformed into a potential triumph. One evening, as Gavin was putting the finishing touches on a particularly complex algorithm, Nina came into his home office with 2 mugs of tea in hand. You're working late again, she said, setting one mug beside him. Gavin looked up, blinking as he came back to reality. Sorry, I lost track of time. This project is intense. Nina perched on the edge of his desk. How's it going? You don't talk about it much. Gavin sighed, leaning back in his chair. It's going well, actually. Really well. The software is performing better than I expected, and Dean's team is implementing the changes effectively. That's great. Nina said, studying his face. But nothing. It's fine, Gavin said, though his tone wasn't convincing. Nina raised an eyebrow. Gavin, I know you. Something's bothering you. Gavin was quiet for a moment, gathering his thoughts. It's just strange, I guess. Working with Dean again. Every time we have a meeting or a call, I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, for him to reveal that this was all some elaborate scheme to. I don't know, humiliate me or something. Do you really think he'd do that? Nina asked gently. I don't know. I thought I knew him once, and look how that turned out. Nina reached out, taking his hand. Gavin, you're not the same person you were back then. You're stronger now, more confident. Whatever Dean's motives are, you're more than capable of handling it. Gavin squeezed her hand, feeling some of the tension leave his body. You're right, as usual. Nina grinned. Of course I am. Now, come on, your tea's getting cold, and I made dinner. The project can wait until morning. As Gavin followed her out of the office, he felt a rush of gratitude. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he knew he wouldn't face them alone. The weeks flew by, and before Gavin knew it, the development project was entering its final stages. His software had exceeded all expectations, turning what could have been a catastrophic failure into a resounding success. On a crisp autumn morning, Gavin found himself standing on the roof of the nearly completed building, surveying the bustling construction site below. Dean stood beside him, a look of awe on his face. I can't believe we actually pulled this off, Dean said, shaking his head. Gavin, I don't know how to thank you. Gavin shrugged. No need for thanks. You paid for my services. I delivered. That's all there is to it. Dean turned to face him fully. No, it's more than that. You saved my ass, Gavin. My career, my reputation, hell, probably my marriage. If this had failed. Your marriage? Gavin couldn't help but ask, curiosity getting the better of him. Dean's face clouded. Yeah. Things with Jenna have been tough. This project was supposed to be our big break, you know. The thing that would finally give her the life she wanted. When it started to go south, well. Gavin felt a twinge of something, not quite sympathy, but not the satisfaction he might have expected either. I'm sorry to hear that, he said, surprised to find he meant it. Dean laughed bitterly. You're sorry? After what we did to you? Man, you're a better person than I am. That was never in question, Gavin replied dryly. They stood in silence for a moment, the sounds of construction filling the air. Finally, Dean spoke again. Listen, Gavin, I know I have no right to ask this, but do you think you could ever forgive me for what happened with Jenna? Gavin considered the question carefully. Forgiveness is a strong word, Dean. I don't hate you anymore, if that's what you're asking. But trust? Friendship? Those bridges are burned. Some things can't be undone. Dean nodded slowly. I understand. For what it's worth, I truly am sorry. And I'm glad. I'm glad you found happiness. You deserve it. Before Gavin could respond, his phone buzzed. It was a text from Nina. Don't forget, charity gala tonight. Your tux is ready. I've got to go, Gavin said, pocketing his phone. We'll touch base next week about the final implementations. As he turned to leave, Dean called after him. Gavin, for old time's sake, good luck tonight. Whatever it is. Gavin paused, then nodded once before heading for the elevator. That evening, Gavin stood before the mirror, adjusting his bow tie. The charity gala was a big deal, a chance to network with potential clients and give back to the community. As he fussed with his cuffs, Nina appeared behind him, resplendent in a deep blue gown. You clean up nice, she said, smoothing his lapels. Ready to go wow the masses? Gavin turned, taking in her appearance. Wow, you look incredible. Nina grinned, doing a little twirl. Why, thank you, kind sir. Now, come on, our chariot awaits. The gala was in full swing when they arrived. The grand ballroom of the city's most prestigious hotel was filled with the elite, all dressed to the nines and sipping champagne. Gavin and Nina made their way through the crowd, stopping to chat with acquaintances and potential clients. As they paused by the bar, Gavin felt a tap on his shoulder. He turned to find himself face to face with Jenna. Gavin, she said, her voice barely audible over the din of the party. I didn't expect to see you here. Gavin recovered quickly from his surprise. Jenna. It's been a while. An awkward silence fell between them. Nina, sensing the tension, stepped forward. Hi, I'm Nina, she said, extending her hand. Gavin's partner. Jenna shook her hand, a flicker of something passing across her face. Nice to meet you. I'm Jenna. Gavin and we used to be married. Nina nodded, her smile unwavering. Gavin told me about you. Are you here with Dean? At the mention of her husband's name, Jenna's composure slipped. No, he couldn't make it. Work, you know. Gavin frowned. He knew for a fact that the development project was in its final stages, with most of the work complete. What could be keeping Dean away from such an important event? Before he could ponder further, a commotion near the entrance caught everyone's attention. Dean burst into the ballroom, his tuxedo askew, his face flushed. Jenna, he called out, stumbling slightly as he made his way toward them. There you are. I've been looking everywhere for you. As Dean reached their group, the smell of alcohol was unmistakable. Jenna's face was a mask of embarrassment and anger. Dean, what are you doing here? You said you had work. Dean waved his hand dismissively. Work, schmirk. I finished early. Thought I'd surprise you. His gaze landed on Gavin, and his eyes widened. Gavin, my man. What are the odds, huh? Gavin tensed, instinctively stepping slightly in front of Nina. Dean, I think maybe you should call it a night, he said, keeping his voice calm. Dean's jovial expression darkened, his eyes narrowing. Call it a night? The night's just getting started. Come on, let's have a drink, for old time's sake. Jenna grabbed Dean's arm. That's enough, we're leaving now. But Dean shook her off, his movements unsteady. No, wait. I want to talk to Gavin. Man to man. He turned to Gavin, his eyes glassy. You know, I never understood how you did it. How you made it look so easy. The success, the money. Even now, you've got it all figured out. Meanwhile, I'm. Dean stopped, his face twisted in frustration, but it was clear he wasn't finished. The room had gone quiet, with many guests now watching the unfolding scene. You want to know a secret, Gavin? Dean slurred, leaning in closer. This whole project, the one you saved. It's built on sand. I cut corners, fudged numbers, anything to make it work. And now, even with your help, it's all falling apart. Jenna's face drained of color. What are you talking about, Dean? Dean laughed bitterly. Oh, you didn't know. Of course, you didn't. You were too busy spending money we didn't have, trying to keep up with the lifestyle you thought you deserved. A surge of anger rose in Gavin, not for himself, but for Jenna, despite everything that had happened between them. Whatever her faults, she didn't deserve to be humiliated like this in front of a room full of strangers. That's enough, Dean, Gavin said firmly, stepping closer. You're drunk, and you're making a scene. Go home. Dean's expression contorted with rage. You don't get to tell me what to do, he shouted, drawing the attention of more onlookers. You think you're so much better than me, don't you? Well, guess what? You're not. You're just a nerd who got lucky. And Jenna? She never loved you. She was just using you, just like she used me. Before anyone could react, Dean swung wildly at Gavin. But his drunken state made him clumsy, and Gavin easily sidestepped the punch. Dean stumbled forward, crashing into a nearby table and sending glasses shattering to the floor. Within moments, security guards appeared, quickly restraining Dean as he continued to shout incoherently. They escorted him out of the ballroom, leaving a trail of stunned silence in his wake. Jenna stood frozen, her face a mask of shock and humiliation. Gavin turned to Nina, his expression filled with concern. Are you okay? Nina nodded, her eyes wide. I'm fine, but Gavin. What he said about the project, is it true? Gavin's mind was already racing. If what Dean had said was true, the implications were staggering. He would need to go through every line of code, every decision, to see where things had gone wrong. He was pulled from his thoughts by a soft touch on his arm. Jenna stood before him, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. Gavin, I don't know what to say. I'm so sorry for everything. Gavin looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time in years. Gone was the confident, ambitious woman he'd married. In her place stood someone broken, lost. Jenna, he said gently, go home. Sort things out with Dean. And take care of yourself. Jenna nodded, wiping at her eyes. Thank you, Gavin. For everything. With that, she turned and hurried out of the ballroom. The murmurs of gossip rose around them as Nina took Gavin's hand. Want to get out of here? She asked quietly. Gavin nodded, suddenly exhausted. More than anything. Later that night, as they sat on their balcony looking out over the city lights, Nina broke the companionable silence. Are you okay? That was intense. Gavin took a sip of his whiskey, considering. You know what? I am. For the first time in a long time, I feel free. Nina raised an eyebrow. Free. Gavin nodded. Seeing Jenna and Dean tonight, hearing about their problems. I realized something. All this time, a part of me was still angry, still hurt. But now I just feel sorry for them. And the project? Nina asked, her voice filled with concern. If what Dean said is true, then I'll fix it, Gavin said simply. It'll be a challenge, but I've faced worse. And this time, I've got you in my corner. Nina smiled, leaning her head on his shoulder. Always. As they sat there, enjoying the night air in each other's company, Gavin felt a sense of peace wash over him. The past was the past. He had a bright future ahead of him, with a woman who loved him for who he was, not what he could provide. In the end, karma had indeed come full circle. But instead of finding satisfaction in Jenna and Dean's misfortune, Gavin found himself grateful for the path that had led him here. He had lost a wife and a best friend, but he had gained so much more: self-respect, true love, and a life lived on his own terms. As the first light of dawn began to paint the sky, Gavin knew with certainty that the best was yet to come.